So what I have done yesterday is basically admitted Russia in the protocol kingdoms, and then clarified how all of that becomes basically some planetary protocol that we need to keep on mind all of the time, and where any other understanding or discussion of politics in any other way would not make any sense anymore. As I can understand, a few issues immediately will emerge out of such reset that I have done yesterday. And I would therefore try to clarify each of these concerns today. First one, how much, by awakening that monarchy, how much it would be Serbia taking over controlship over Russia. Here I'm enclosing what monarchy in substance is answer, what monarchy in substance is, and how it should be understood. And that is as a family, and that is why we are bringing it forward, because monarchy is actually family, not one person. How, for example, they tried to play with Josip Broz Tito, which was also one of the descendants of royal blood of Europe, but then has been played as a civil, as a regular civilian, as of nothing less but movement of working class, where everything was about brotherhood and equality. But he was royal blood. Nevertheless, he has been treated as a hen, not as a family. Because obviously, we are to understand now socialism steps away from family protocol, which monarchy is actually statement of a family and royal blood or royal lineage altogether, which in the same time brings the entire history and the entire idea of a nation, and that is why we end up talking about national or cultural historic heritage house, because it is not that we end up talking only about the king or the queen that is chairman in a given time, but we talk about entire lineage, we talk about protocol, which is reflecting the entire time, the entire life, living time of a nation, existing with such kind of ID, genetic ID. I understand, therefore, here, contrary to how it was played in socialism, one person playing a hen to a nation and then planting random eggs, despite what's the real true identity stamp of a nation, which is perfect measurement of taking over certain historic lands, or amending them to greater an extent. Nothing of that I would see equally that much negative if you have good hen in question. It might end up to be a blessing rather, or sunshine or sunlight. However, the approach that end up to be used is basically annulling entire historic duration previous of a nation and culture of a region within its own fabric. And that is where you're going to notice things have been done way too much going in some kind of other direction that might end up literally as a takeover without residual, which is not what we are going to find acceptable criteria for any political eventfulness on any of the territories. Genetic improvement, yes. Takeover, we can't accept that, because we don't know what would be behind using the hens as a protocol. We don't know who is controlling the game. It ends up to be more like someone playing chess on the table or something. Even birds know now that Tito was descendant, if not directly son of Churchill. And that that becomes very much now a matter of someone playing chess on on a map of the region at the time. And obviously, it was a very much accepted standard at that time, which is just last century actually. Although, since we have records of Han Dynasty or Han Dynasty all the way to China, we should certainly now pay attention much more to this entire situation altogether. And certainly nothing starts from Churchill here at all. Now, to the extent that out of that breed of Tito playing hen on our territories, entire nation became revamped, should I say, including my bloodline. I don't know how that happened, but considering who was my father or one of the grandfathers, it's not going to surprise me. However, the point being that we are having here, from my perspective, something is interfering with what is the real historic stamp of territories and of nations. And that is where I'm going to find that someone would have been tribunal societies, because they're the ones that are interfering here for a longer period of time with this level, with much more organized political approaches. Now let's notice again that on this entire planet today we have that kind of conflicting situation. The tribunal society versus more structured build-up of more structured political configuration on the territories. In that context, you can't say one or another, because it's not that we are going to slaughter people now. We are going to talk about how we are going to now adjust this situation, how we are going to basically configure all of that into what we can call today preceding present political answers and political solutions. Of course, no one is going to accept some kind of freelance of tribes running all over the planet again. Don't even go there. And if someone was thinking that magically we are going to return there, I'm going to find that rather unacceptable, because for quite some time we employ our organizational mind or skill, as organization is key to any human activity, I would say, that is more complex. And whenever you find yourself in some kind of much more complex situation, you try to categorize things, and that is where organization happens. And whenever we want to point out that certain civilizations or certain territories have been having that and that and that, and everyone is going and wow, they're very excited about how people have been living also in much earlier times. But what you get here very much admiring is the organizational skill of these people, even on earlier stages, right? Which indicates that human derived from an animal, because it brings, as I have been discussing yesterday, capacity for much more complex thinking, and start acting in much more complex kind of situations. All of that will require certain categorization, standardization, therefore organization. So us living in earlier prime stages is never going to be a question mark, should we, because we should not, as our mind is not about to get simpler anytime. It is opposite. As we live longer, we need to handle the past, the present, and the future. So our mind is going to get more complex. That's the promise for sure, rather than to get simpler. And since our mind is going to get more complex, we have to be prepared as we live, as we go, and to bring organization up to date to where is our mind, and how our mind becomes much more challenged. We have to bring our organization up to date to follow where our mind will have to go. Because the instinct of survival required that you deal with challenges to deal with challenges means that you need to understand more and more things, and you need also to be up to the situation. All of that is more complex, require higher organization. Conclusion, us returning backwards, out of question, write it off. Not acceptable, not available, not applicable, as someone would say, not applicable. Accordingly, the only question we have today is how we reset to what we are going to find as the best organizational template for the territories, from where then we can continue much more steady development into the future, doing it together as one world, as one planet. And that is where we turn to the entire work I'm enclosing today, where I am completely charting exactly how we should be thinking about that and what we should be doing about all of that all together. So on certain territories, the reset would happen elegantly without that much of a trouble. On some other territories, there will be historic overlap, and it would be harder to do the reset. As for example, on territories as it is Britannia, there will be just certain light turbulences that will go into direction of bringing forward Scotland and Ireland within much more British defined kingdoms, which then will need to be reflecting on the bloodlines, because what we need to get as a final result from Britannia, where they will be tested from by international monarchical bloodlines, is are they going to recognize? Are they going to reflect the fact that British monarchical bloodlines are basically international monarchical bloodlines, as monarchical bloodlines are basically planetary tree, not national tree, but planetary tree. So international community, or this planetary office that I'm holding as declaring myself as a monarch of Earth, is going to therefore question how far awakening monarchies in Britannia are going to are going to recognize the fact that monarchy houses of Britannia will be just one of the branches of the monarchy of Earth. Now that rule will need to be respected. You implement that, and it's solved somehow in Britannia. Now, we might discuss about in some different occasion about the specifics, but I think that is still example of where we are going to have the least of the problems. I'm not sure. I would say that in Spain equally it's easy solvable. In Italy is easy solvable. Wherever you have clear identity house still intact, it's all easy solvable. It's easy solvable. Austria, Germany, everywhere in Europe will be easy solvable, as long as they remember and they focus on the fact that we in Europe now will need to return our attention to imperial to monarchical bloodlines as a testimony of historic identity, heritage house of a nation, where I'm going to point out therefore that we are not going to talk just about one stamp, as you have to take rather a family, and when you say in family you have different characters. So when you bring family, that is you monarchy as a family, because that is why you bring monarchy protocol, because I bring monarchy protocol because I want to bring family DNA charting, not just identity. Although each time I get reminded on my sister, I feel like I'm mending it a bit, because I'm not exactly about equality. So I'm not promoting equality. I'm just talking about certain genetic stamps that should be recognized as a principle of certain nation. Obviously, not all of the members in a family would be reflecting on the principal stamp house of principal identity of a nation, but at least three colors at least 3 members of a family. If your flag does have 3 colors, at least 3 members would be falling in some kind of description of your historic heritage house. And then, of course, you need to do trajectory of what would be the most ideal approach in recognizing national identity, where then monarchy houses become a house where you do such improvements and where you do such corrections, and basically how you maintain your nation. You maintain your nation via the bloodlines, via principal bloodlines in your nation, which is of course not going to discriminate the rest of the nation because it is all interconnected. People are free to choose their next wives or husbands, and nation should be existing in some kind of appreciation of its history and appreciation of its people. That is how monarchy has been charted, and that is how we should understand it. And then at each time there will be someone being presidenting something. It is the life, it is the protocol human, and everyone should be trying to find the best position for where they are or where they are heading, and to work out that, certainly understanding now that we cannot be conflicting because we all coexist on this earth, and this nature creates that kind of protocol of coexistence. So there is no need to jump over each other in properly charted historic heritage stamp and identity house of a nation. And if we can bring this on ideal stage, on stage of building ideal situation, then it is easier to get there or to maintain the format of a nation within such kind of efforts. Then you bring solid civil caste, civil performance within the national boundaries, and everyone is synchronizing itself within the overall national functioning. I'm going to find this success basically as a successful formula, and there is nothing here I would think that we should be amending, a part of course, specifics as which are going to be solved within as you build, as you progress, as we progress as a civilization, the regulative, the legal systems, behavioral science of behavior. That is what each generation rather brings forward. And it is more like cultural trends where everyone wants to be at any given time up to date, contemporary, modern, and so on and so on. And the civilization by itself imposes rules upon the humanity above any protocol, I would say. But certainly protocols here, I think by now it would be very clear that would be following the standards of legal houses, and continue to be surfacing the constitutional function of a nation. And because today we are discussing genetics, of course, the specifics of what one generation has been doing can completely be completely drawn a line here. And I have been speaking about this already for 15 years, where at some point we draw the line and say, okay, this is why the old generation now and old practices will need to be retired. And that is why we are calling on new generation, because we are going to expect new generations to be legally functional. They will need to be legally admissible in the present legal system. And I'm speaking about that 15 years. I'm going to assume that no one should have been sabotaging my work, and that no one should have been sabotaging what I want to do with my work. I have given chance to next generations of young people to accept the lineage of the imperial houses, if it is to be confirmative that these are real imperial houses. There were international DNA in investigation. We'll need to confirm that we have enough of elements that will confirm that we talk about international imperial bloodline here, international monarchical bloodline. No, how far I would be expecting obviously Roman imperialism to have its own DNA bloodline, and I think that is not going to be that much of a challenge, or European bloodlines. I think that is not going to be that much of a challenge to be proven in Britain as well. What is to be here challenging momentum as we are approaching Serbia and Macedonia, or ancient Macedonia for that matter, especially, as being more of a stamp mark when it comes to monarchical protocol. What become emerging question is how far you will notice here that tribunal societies are interfering within monarchical protocol, or if not, that you would notice that here monarchical protocol at some point becomes actually marionette of tribunal societies. That is where we are going to confront that question mark. How tribunal societies are relating to monarchical protocol in all of the times. And as we do not have that much of a choices, rather than to admit them today within entire national protocol, of course, I think they're also going to be noticed, obviously, within the monarchical bloodlines as well. That is where they would be basically present within the building of monarchical bloodlines of the times. And since we're talking about earlier times, of course, that niche would have been present in all entire European aristocracy, all the way to England. And I'm talking here about especially the stamp of Alexander and what was fathering him, and that is Indo-Celts of Europe, Indo-European Celts. Accordingly, at this point, Indo-European Celts are getting prince state status. I cannot give them at point of Macedonia king status, which obviously they are going to generate at some point of Richard Lionheart. But let's notice that at that point we have Indo-European Celts getting monarchical status from earlier times, and which is explaining why they are present in the entire monarchical breed of monarchies of Europe. However, let's notice that cannot be the only monarchical face of the monarchical houses of Europe. As I have said, when we bring monarchy forward, we actually talk about family, because that is what measures humanity. And as equally reflected in flags when spoken about building a nation and who was really building a nation, which is of course all going to be embodied within the monarchical stamps as well. I'm pointing out that therefore when we talk about monarchical houses and monarchical bloodlines, it's not going to be just about one prototype or one identity, but it's going to be about a family of properties, of characters that would have been typical for certain time period, even typical for the entire nation, I would say, because we would be talking here about tribes that have been formating a nation. That is how in initial nations, the prime nations start to be formated by tribes united into a nation. So we would be talking about couple of preceding or dominating identities that would have been creating a nation, and they would be basically present and very sure and reflecting the monarchical family itself. Because when the princes or princesses would to get married, they would be getting married by the aristocrats of the time. So that is how the bloodline, the monarchical bloodline, begins to reflect actually these structures, the leading structures that have been constituting a nation in a given time period. Well reflected in most of European flags, which are testimony about the genetic structure of a nation, above all. And here in Ukraine, and Ukraine is right to point out, their flag does have two colors. And we are going to notice that. We are not going to have problem with that. But that doesn't give right to Russians and Europeans now to fight or to try to split that flag or the genetics of the mixed bloodlines that exist in these territories that have been created since beginning of last century, as when the turbulences with Ukraine started, or where, as President Putin explained, Ukraine has been actually created. And so what? And Monaco was created at some point of time. No one is going to annul it down now. And Kosovo was created just the other day. I mean, Albania. What is painful here, that you have 110 years since certain states have been created. For 110 years, how many generations would be born there, and how many kids would be born out of these generations? Split that by 20 years for each generation to produce its own next generation. That is like 5 generations you have already, 5-6 generations of new generations being born in that country, which consider that country as their country. What you're going to do with these 6 generations of people? Are you going to split them? Are you going to split their families? Are you going to take their kids away from the parents? And why anyone would be doing that? I mean, I would say here as a rule should be, when you create a state, you can't undo it. I mean, that is more like a marriage. You can undo it, but kids are going to suffer. And you will never, you can't split the kids. There's a problem here. You can't return how it was before, because like in a marriage, it's never going to be as before, because you have kids. And it will never be as before. Simply it can't be, because you have kids. And more you institute certain nation as its own nation, harder it will be to return backwards. Now, if you have, for example, in Kosovo now, families that are going not to mix with any other family, but going to start mixing between themselves only, which is harder imaginable for Kosovo. Or you have your generations build up in New Kosovo, where they are going to be just of New Kosovo, which is very little territory to anyone to assume something like that. It's not even possible. It's not possible even in Albania. Albania still does have a memory of Illyri, because to live on territories like that, it is that you are more doomed by the previous history, which is much more greater than you will ever be. It's very hard to overwrite such history. It's very hard to overwrite ancient Macedonia, even to present days. It's very hard to overwrite Illyria. That is why Albania is never going to be successful, because the history of that region, you have Venice there and Venetian kingdom. So these kingdoms are very strong to the present days, and it's never going to be easy. It's going to be impossible to create Albania there. It's going to be just talking about foam on top of the beer. On certain territories, that is simply impossible. On certain territories, which was much more on the outskirts of everything, which were much more on the periphery of everything, it was easier to create a nation. It was more like trying to solve certain problems. Like in Palestine, for example, Well, state of Palestine was created in order to provide house to these tribes. It was more about giving roof to certain people. And it was easy to create Palestine. And it's easy to speak about Palestine there. It is easy to speak about Ukraine because there is not that much of something before that much strong that you cannot override. I guess Putin was talking about equally about the fact that there are Austrians living in Ukraine, that there are Romanians living in Ukraine, and Russians living in Ukraine. That is going to make probably some federation status of Ukraine now, to be given certain kind of recognition of this kind of provinces of Ukraine. They're going to have a bit different legislation when it comes to amending certain, to be enclosed certain much more typical cultural issues that will need to be covered there, for example. But to split Ukraine, I think that will be very painful process, because economy started to build there, especially after war period, where industrialization of Europe, especially these territories, have been basically going to such high rate, and that everything that they are today was actually happening in post-war period, and it is very much happening within Ukrainian kind of configuration, and which means that if you want to split Ukraine, you will need to split the entire economic configuration, economic infrastructure, which is heavy industry, and the entire software that comes with it, which is simply rather impossible. It is simply rather impossible because we have very solid investment after Second World War on each of these territories, especially on the infrastructural side, especially where it is heavy industry, where these heavy energetic enterprises, heavy metal enterprises, there are heavy industrial investments. You can't easily split that. You can't easily move that somewhere. It is impossible. And you talk about 5 generations of people born on these territories, on these territories already. 5 generations of people. That is absurd. It is rather absurd. I have not been living in Ukraine. I don't know that many people of Ukraine. I can't be voice of Ukraine, but I can notice that people, that Ukrainians have their national identity, that they are very much playing their flag. They're very much having some kind of sense of political integrity. And I think that this world is troubled with many other stuff, and we should not be wasting too much time to highlight certain territories, only as much as we need to return today to reflecting the history of the planet, not just history of the nations. I mean, now the question is, of course, how far, if we return to monarchies, how far nations would like to return to their actual monarchical boundaries. As much as I found easy doable with ancient Macedonia, because it happened just in last century. I would say, isn't it not similar situation as with Ukraine? It is different situation because it was created new state. It was opposite. What in Ukraine, it was new state created. In Macedonia, it was one state was split in 3 pieces. And now it is easier to return these pieces that still think of themselves as a pieces of the previous. It is easier to assemble them again than to do opposite. it was harder to do opposite. But they have done it nevertheless in previous century, and it was the most painful experience. Macedonians have been struggling a lot. Many have been slaughtered as well, because you become part of another country, and many and you would not have right to be the previous. That is, if Ukrainians now, if 1/3 of Ukraine is going in Austria, for example, they will be enforced to disconnect from anything Ukrainian, including families. It's going to be similar like North and South Korea, or East and West Berlin. It's going to be very painful. And what has happened, they could have not get in peace before they ruin that wall, bring it down, and reunite again. Families. One can say it was the other way around, equally painful for these Austrians to become away from Austria. And it's equally painful from Romanians to be away from Romania or whatever, and Russians to be away from Russia. And they certainly should be going on referendum then. I think it should be going on referendum. And I think equally in Macedonia should be going on referendum. Also in Macedonia, I'm going to say it is different situation again, because it has been the painful event of something taking away from some unified situation was harder. Now, how much is going to be hard to bring people back in Macedonia if they're already in Greece or they're already in Bulgaria, and maybe they don't want to go in Macedonia or to be Macedonians again. Again, it's a question of referendum rather. But these are very painful situations where people go and artificially impose on nations something like that. Families pay the highest price there. It is very, very hard to do it. In whatever direction to go, it is very painful, and it should be avoided by any cost. Now, when it comes to Macedonia, I think it is another story, because nothing has been left out of Macedonia. It basically amounts for a nation becoming extinct. To the extent that there are Macedonian people that are creating one very strong, actually, presence within overall international community, and within the protocol imperial bloodlines as well, although it is questionable what kind of face value has been brought. I think that that is also easily amendable, that we bring a couple more faces within the family structure of monarchy of Macedonia. I think it is more justifiable in case of Macedonia, because there is nothing left of Macedonia otherwise, and the history of Macedonia is quite substantial, does have impact all over the planet, and would make certain sense, I would say, to bring forward that level of political interface. Now, I haven't done any much more thorough analysis. This is really very much on the surface. My point is, again, to speak about importance of holding to nations within much more of a developed sense of national identity and national integrity as a historic heritage house. I bring forward bloodlines, importance of bloodlines, and these are the parameters that I would enclose in defending how further these questions would need to be solved. But I cannot insist too much into going in certain direction, because it would require much more presence on the ground to understand the sentiment of people, how people feel about all of that, because it is pointless to pressure people into something who've been living for a longer period of time, already a century, somewhere else. You can't pressure on them anything. It will need to be some kind of referendum still, I would argue. If we don't unite Macedonia in such way, I think that Macedonia does have a very weak chance to survive as a country. Because it's very small. One say even Monaco is small, but it's still there. Maybe, but it is very also very questionable now that they very easily translate into some kind of Slavic dominion, Slovenian dominion, rather than ancient dominion, and then you are willing to confiscate ancient history. And that is where how I find myself outlander with this level of work. And I can't be outlander with this level of work. And there's a problem here. I can imagine similar question would be of Spain of Scotland and Ireland when it comes to identifying British monarchical house as a genetic question, where they would like much higher, especially Ireland, I would argue, would seek more stronger admission within the British DNA house. Because let's see now, let's strip it further, let's bring it further to its core, that we are talking about DNA houses here. And as much as I'm saying that international impact will be important, record it very well with even Indian presence within the monarchy of England. It's undeniable that when it comes to Britain, heavy weight would have the rest of Britain within the charting of DNA identity of the region, without any doubt. We certainly bring international bloodline to justify the imperial protocol, the currency, and all of the rest. But it is obvious that a very big weight, very strong weight in all of that would be the look of these people, the beautiness of their appearance, which is blonde eyes or green eyes and blonde hair and beautiful faces, which is British rather stamp, and that is why they will have right to enclose it as a higher credit to their British participation within the monarchical protocol of Britannia. And I think that when we certify that properly, no one would have right to argue about it that much. That is British ID. That is where Britannia stands. Now, when you go in Macedonia, and you end up with just Alexander stealing it all within some kind of Slavic dominion and ends up everything somewhere in Central Europe. And there is nothing left from ancient Macedonian history, a part of Central European spell. You find that not the most correct approach when also I find myself born in under the flag of Macedonia, also Yugoslavian flag, three-colored flag as well. I find myself treated as outlander by certain little yellow people that are still playing some kind of little Alexander dominion and are completely sending me away from my right to be called Macedonian, to call myself Macedonian. I'm just losing the right to be called myself Macedonian because present Macedonia become North Macedonia, which is Slavic Macedonia, and where the dominion are blonde people. And I become outlander or second-hand citizen, or maybe not even a citizen, because they have split Macedonia in three parts. Now, why this is more important than story of Ukraine? But maybe because I deliver this level of work, and I'm not going to accept to play Alexander with this, to play outlander with this level of work. Maybe that becomes actually strong argument. that is going to crash the entire the right of North Macedonia to call itself Macedonia. It can be called South whatever, South Serbia, or South Slovenia. Yeah, if they want to be that much Slavic and to point out that they are that much Slavic, also that will need to go on referendum as well. But if they want to use the yellow stamp, then they should be calling themselves South Slovenia. South Slovenia, yes. But they cannot call themselves Macedonians. North Macedonia would make some sense, but if I can't call myself Macedonian being born in that Macedonia, if I'm outlander in that Macedonia, it's not going to be, they would not have a right to call themselves Macedonians, because they're not playing that Macedonia properly. Even if you're North Macedonia as a land, still Macedonia is there. First of all, where are the rest of Macedonians? I mean, North Macedonia will make sense only if there is South Macedonia, East Macedonia, West Macedonia. That's very similar like Westminster Palace. Like it is West, but you don't know to what. Or Buckingham Palace, it is backing someone, but you don't know whom. And what is that? Like halfway of something. Like you exist in half of something. What's the meaning of backing them when we don't know who on earth is them? And what kind of name that is? And can be that certified as well? You certify it on what? If the outcome of what Macedonia is today, that I am outlander, Macedonia cannot be, even as a state, because I am associated with existence of that name, with configuration of the state, of the name itself. I'm on the foundations of configurating name Macedonia. If I end up to be outlander, Macedonia cannot exist as a reference. End of discussion. In other words, it is the other way around. North cannot be more north than it should be. And that is why some people are right when they say, although I was thinking that North is still the best reference if someone wants to continue to play that yellow note of what Macedonia is. But I'm going to understand more and more why people do not like that name, because they, equally as myself, feel themselves less included in Protocol Macedonia. However, neither it is right to call only that small piece of land Macedonia, because you allow someone to steal ancient history of that country, and that is equally dangerous, if not even more dangerous. Accordingly, it is all up to constitution now that will need to be that will need to be created there, where it will need to be notified that North Macedonia is part of 1/3 of previous previous ancient kingdom of Macedonia. It will need to be stated in the constitution that North Macedonia is part 1/3 of the previous ancient kingdom of Macedonia, and where therefore there will be accordingly percentage of population living there within their constitutional rights to be recognized their constitutional rights. It cannot be called minority if they look more like as how they decided to call today Bulgarians, which was therefore rather previously just dark-haired lion of the movie Lion King, and being pushed out of the country. No, there are still people living in east part of the country, still people living in Macedonia, which call themselves Macedonians. And if someone is going, myself included, and if someone is going to tell me that I am now second-hand citizen because of that, I would not understand that. Certainly I would not accept that. I would not accept by any chance to be treated as a second-hand citizen in that country. But if I was not capable to have a job, to find job in that country because of my dark hair, then I'm going to find that ludicrous. Ludicrous. Just crazy. Ludicrous. Here, or we have this multiracial platform elsewhere in the world. This is someone cutting with a knife too much in that Macedonia. And that's someone playing some kind of nonsense too much in that Macedonia. And that's someone losing mind too much in that Macedonia. All together. Or people of Asian Macedonia. That is not Asian Macedonia. It's the Macedonia. When someone in Britain out there in last century cut it dead with a knife. And certain people left on one or on the other side. And then if you left by any mistake, have been left by any mistake in North Macedonia, what's being called North Macedonia today, they're giving you status as minority group. In your own country, you become minority group. That is absurd. Where is the genetics here? You can't declare here Macedonian genetics as North Macedonia. Or you end up being laughing stock. Yeah, you end up being laughing stock. Good for a circus for sure. Laughing stock for sure. Laughing stock. It's not going to be addressed to my cousin. It's going to be addressed to someone sitting in England, someone sitting in Central Europe, or wherever else in this mega tailors that have been tailoring the map of the planet of the planet, yes, as it is something to do with them personally. I mean, I can't understand that. I can understand if you're king of a territory, and then you can do something like that. But when you sit as a third person somewhere miles and miles and miles away, and you're like playing who? Exactly, a god himself? How on earth you have earned to precede over other people to such degree of interventionism? That is where one is going to question imperialism as itself, how far that went into building something. Well, actually, most of the time, they're in the same time destroying something else. And to the extent that everything that today become imperial heritage is associated with that much of a distraction elsewhere in the world, it is to be questioned to its core, to its DNA protocol itself, right there to the center of all, to its DNA protocol. And today you will be tested, you will be measured by nothing less than DNA protocol itself. On that note, I'm going to conclude. Today, on all the questions of Macedonia, it's going to be preceded upon the DNA protocol versus what means to be Macedonian. That is DNA protocol attached to name Macedonia. My verdict for today. If I am, it is not that I am going to be minority in Macedonia because I'm of Eastern Macedonia DNA origin, but Macedonia cannot use Macedonia. The moment they step to spell something like that, automatically they lose the right to call themselves Macedonia altogether, become just North Point X planet, North Planet X, or North State X. The moment they dare to call me minority, they're losing their right to use name Macedonia. My verdict for today. Accordingly, in conclusion, nation is a family. Nation is a family. Monarchy stamp is a family. We can only talk about the members of the family. It's out of question that only one step can get out of millenniums of living on certain territory, especially if you have been principle protocol, which means accomplishment on a higher scale of matters. It would be mixed breed in question. It would be mixed genetics in question. Therefore, it would be much more complex code in question. It would be in question more complex stamp. And the best answer you can get in the given circumstances is that we would be talking about family, not just one member, but you need to take into consideration who was the father and who was the mother in that protocol. And then you have name of a state. You don't enclose a family, monarchical family, as a reference to configuration and constitution of a nation. You can't use a name as a reference to a nation when that name refers to complex DNA rather than simple DNA. But then you want to go on with simple answer and use some complexity into simplicity, and then you prevail as well. We can't walk history under such logic. That is absurd, simply absurd. And why someone would like to play that way? Someone wants to simplify things on this earth. It's time to notice that. Who is that someone? Are you talking Martians at this point? Or Venus, planet Venus? Which one is? Because someone is using here that blonde child as a passing ticket. Passing ticket to what? And to where? And as what? And Makedonija ednina je koga ja se odlučam da bude ednina. Inače je množina. It's my work. But I'm not sure that much about Mars or Venus, but I'm very much more certain that would be in question oligarchy of Macedonian oligarchy that is rooted from the times of ancient Macedonia, and then when when Alexander was killed and his mother as well, and when the entire monarchy was dismantled, and when they shared the empire, therefore they or them are the oligarchs, and they are using to present days, obviously, the yellow boy, the yellow Alexander, as a symbol to their identity, to their, it becomes like a kind of stamp mark of their integrated, organized, should they call it criminal, organized, yes, I'm very sure by now that would be a criminal. Today, therefore, I have to insist that I'm declaring monarchy alert, because I think that you all need such answer, and I think that with such answer, I am actually making easier for any of you to continue to be in your skin and to at least have some kind of promise that you can get out of it. I think that I really happen here as a savior with this answer, that you need this answer actually. And that's why mathematics becomes also mathematical, and we understand why mathematics would have such importance, because mathematics provide solution. It is about problem solving. Mathematics would be considered as a problem solving. And what I'm doing all of this because obviously we need to solve certain problems. The point of this entire approach is to solve a problem. And therefore, what is the end result of this discussion? It will need to be seen as a solution to a problem. Not as a problem, but as a solution to a problem. Well, I'm going to notice that Britannia does have very much practice, long-term practice, long-time standing practice to use our kids, to overburden immigrant kids with what are the challenges of the times, political challenges of the times. Now, Britannia does not have right to continue to molestate our kids to such degree. From my perspective, everything that is born out of me is my kid. I mean, the age group, even if they are now in their 30s, they are still my kids. And they have been burdened from the time they come here at the age of 3 and 5. You don't burden at such young age people with such level of political responsibility. It end up to be basically kid in category of molestating kids. Britannia should stop such practice, and tribunal societies should stop such practice of molestating kids from earlier age. And that is going to be addressed Serbia as well with all of this. I have recovered the monarchy of Russia yesterday, but not Serbia with it. With it, I'm recovering the code of the monarchy itself, which is rather on the gentle side, as I have said already. I am also using it to bridge the ancient history of the region altogether in Macedonia as a matter of monarchical matrix. I'm bringing, therefore, the entire subject in category monarchy, planetary monarchy family, or planetary monarchy protocol. And then I'm bringing it to Olymp, or to matrix of the monarchy protocol itself, to what I attach the ancient attributes of my work. In that context, I'm solving the problem of what can surface today territories and what it cannot. I'm solving the problem of how far today Serbia can really play Serbia in all of this, and how far it is not up to Serbia to play Serbia in all of this. Molestating kids, molestating women, or molestating family as a protocol will need to be recognized as not acceptable in 21st century on any levels of our lives, especially not in politics. I'm going to immediately ask you to stop holding, giving that much everything to my son. As for my children forward, he is not supposed to bear me on his shoulders, or his parents. That is not what parenthood is. Parenthood is there to assist and to help out kids, not to be burden to kids. When you make situation to be like that, when you make him to feel like parents are his burden, you are technically using that as a weapon versus certain kind of order, versus political orders. These kids end up to be used as a political weapon versus their own genetic lineage, versus their own identity house. And you become a creature and a monster yourself, Britannia and Britons. You become political monsters and political creatures. And it is time to find out how far that creaturehood goes there and what exactly is the face of that creaturehood altogether. But as of now, I am going to take the burden from the shoulders of my son. I'm going to ask you to equally help your sons and daughters as well. But by not waiting too much on them, what is to be rather the future. And that you accept on your shoulders this conversation as it is happening, I have said many times, on the level of my generation. We, my generation, are going to solve these issues, not our kids, for God's sake. Britons, Britannia, you have been ordered accordingly. Ordered as well. You're not going to deal with my kids, you're dealing with me. And I am dealing with you as well. In that context, I'm addressing Britannia with therefore misusing imperial kids of imperial bloodlines for a longer period of time by overweighting on their young shoulders the weight of the entire planetary history, obviously, without giving them any kind of suitable education or preparation, and basically playing some kind of lottery with their genetics and lotto ticket with their genetics, by setting them, by leaving everything to accident, because they certainly would have not been prepared to deal with such heavy burden of deciding on such heavy questions, as they would not be prepared for something like that. It's good. It will be still certain relief to my kids that I exist here, and that I can shout that much and that everyone can hear me, and that certainly is going to be clear even to birds now. It is about Ark of Covenant, or it is about Holy Grail, and no one, including in Britain, can now get free out of such liability, political therefore, political above all. It's going to fall now with the entire size upon that British island, that Britannia, and that is Ark of Covenant or / Holy Grail protocol. Britannia, my verdict for today. It would be said, therefore, in the context of the previous discussion and the fact that I am dealing with such issues with such skillfulness, undoubtedly genetic, that I would have a right to declare stamp of Olympia active, and on that note would have a right to demand oligarchs of Macedonia to stop seeing themselves as a continuation of historic heritage of ancient Macedonia, or as ancient Macedonians themselves, because in substance they would rather find themselves in restriction mode, because have played down their own monarchy, their own monarchical house and monarchical stamps. They would rather need to be fined rather than to continue to be presumed that they would have some kind of decision-making rights or capacity. According to the rule-making, I'm taking over from them the rule-making. In the last 15 years, I have earned such right to basically become be a rule-maker myself, and they cannot be accepted to continue to be rule makers on fabric matter they have profoundly disrespected. With that note, I'm closing protocol monarchy of ancient Macedonia as how it has been perceived so far. However, it is going to certainly open further next question, and that is, who Olympia really was, and how far from positions of how today it has been perceived ancient Macedonia, the story begins there, or it is rather continuation of something that existed before. Here I'm going to question authenticity of such stories versus the evidence on the ground, which is much stronger. And that is that we would rather be speaking about Olymp and Protocol Olymp in the way how until yesterday someone was talking about Atlantis. That is as having its own independent reference, being independent protocol. And I'm going to question how far, what are the consequences when on that territory we confront Protocol Olymp with Protocol Ancient Macedonian Kingdom. It is as something here overlapping in time and space. As we all speak about earlier Macedonian history, ancient history, and it happens in very uncharted way, however, certainly very much full of symbolism. One is to question where here you're going to find something much more tangible as were the previous kingdoms that have been existing on the territories in Asia, for example. Here we can't find some kind of synchronicity or continuation between Asian kingdoms and European kingdoms, which is rather not natural. And the breaking point here is ancient Macedonia, where that story has been invented in such terms to somehow elegantly wipe out the entire previous history, like erasing it, like it is not there even existing, and starting the history from ground zero, basically with using Bible as driver rather than monarchy of Macedonia or Alexander, where him become also, or that is ancient Macedonian playground, become also somehow used as some kind of gadgets, as some kind of role players, artists in the theater called after Bible period, and Jesus and all of that, and Mary and Mary Magdalene and all of that, which basically takes to great an extent ancient Macedonian history into religion and becomes a religion story, but somehow becomes eraser for European and Western civilization of anything that existed before, and it stops even stop validating them as a historic event. There is absolutely no validation to anything that existed before a Macedonian kingdom, and even more biblical event of rather refurnished concept of Israel. I'm going to call it refurnished concept of Israel or story of Israel. No matter how much we can validate Israel existing within its biblical times, we don't have here synchronicity with previous kingdoms, and I'm going to find that not practical, because of such specific events as, for example, monarchy family of Macedonia, where we can't even talk about all of the members, for example, about the mother, which most probably was having Indo-European Celtic descent. And because of the suffix Indo, it's not admitted in library of ancient Macedonia. But she is the mother. And here we have in question, she is not, of course, direct India woman. She would be obviously born from the bloodline that would have that kind of lineage. But the fact is that you stop talking about parents at the point of Alexander's kingdom. Indicate that history here somewhere at that point becomes broken. And the genetic lineage we should be talking about today becomes cut out, disconnected, but then reappears somewhere in England, in Britannia. And it is like we never heard it before. Like it was not there before. Like, no, Britannia go direct to India and India go direct to Britannia. Like there is nothing in between. But then we end up talking about what is the currency of India? Rupees, which means holes. Or in Britain also you can recognize it as hallmark. And you see here, it is like in between these two positions, which found themselves in some kind of agreement, equally as Britannia find itself in agreement easily with someone in Saudi Arabia and decide to jump over entire Europe, especially Eastern ancient Europe, especially Southeastern Europe, which is the most ancient of all of the European territories, the most ancient part of Europe, which is Greco-Macedonian history, continue to be rather left to some kind of superficial stories that lose any kind of historic validation. And everyone gets serious when speaking about Roman imperialism. You turn on to television and everyone is speaking about Roman imperialism with sense of historic validation. There is historic weight to it. When you speak ancient Macedonia or ancient Greece, like it is more imaginary event. Like it's not there. Everyone is talking today about some kind of Trojan horse as it is some kind of negative event somewhere in computer industry, which is a harassment of official history, of official territories. And it should not be easy to make that level of harassment of history. That is like you call some kind of virus in computer industry Venice or Rome. You can't name negative event with official, valid, historic event. It is a blasphemy. It is heresy. It is highest level of disrespect. First of all, that history, that part of the planet, which is rather the center of the planet, not the bottom, not the down there, it's the center of the centers of the planet. It is like center of the city. Yes, like center of the city. It's not bottom of the city, it's center of the city. Although for many of you might be in such meaning. In all of the other much more civilizational, official, formal, democratic, or not democratic, but diplomatic ways. Center of the city is center of the republic, center of the nation itself. Center of something is center of something. It is a damn center of something. You don't make name of a virus upon it. Unless you're a complete imbecile. Unless you have a reason for something like that, because you're imbecile, I wanted to say. Well, I get this inflamed in shortcut. I want to say I don't have time to waste too much on arguing. What I have said just right now, I'm sorry, but I can't be bothered with spending too much on this. That is what I have just said. And I'm using this method because I wanted to say something like that. I don't have that much to spend on dragging this indefinitely. I want to cut through. That's why I'm using this tone. What I'm saying, I want to cut through all of this nonsense and all of this balloonies that you're going to give me as an answer, I would like to say, don't bother. I don't have the time to listen. Bull something. Time to listen your answer, neither to wait on it. I'm proceeding instantly. Therefore, let's summarize. The problem with entire fame of ancient Macedonia is giving too much attention to Alexander, son of the empire, but not enough highlight to the parents, especially to the mother, since today entire world still talks about Olympic Games. Where I'm going to question how far we talk here about ancient Macedonia, or it has been invented just for the purpose of inventing Alexander, or we are rather talking in the way how they wanted to project him, that is son of Western society. Well, if we find ourselves in story of Olymp, it would be much harder for West to get away with anything whatsoever. So I'm going to assume that they have simply refabricating something just for the purpose of bringing it much more in some kind of more narrow corridors and then going away with simplifying things altogether. That is, in conclusion, I'm going to notice that something here has been rather simplified or oversimplified. It has been oversimplified, the fact that Macedonian entire region of Greco-Macedonian peninsula or Balkan peninsula exists very much on the borderline of Asian continent and European continent, and would be reflecting in its all of its historic times, would be reflecting obviously exactly that, how Asian history and culture gradually transit into European history and culture. And on these territories, that would have been reflected in various characters, including the top imperial performances. And as much as we have problem to draw such lines in Rome with Roman imperialism and with the face values and identities of emperors of Rome, it is hard to distance from Eastern, Middle East, and entire East. It is even harder it would be even harder to make such distinctive line in Macedonia or in Greece, for that matter. But to the extent that that has been done in such a way that some real Macedonian history somewhere disappears in the clouds altogether, and you find it all the way in Hollywood somewhere. Here we have a major hole in the entire history books of present times, dominated by Western narrative and Western cultural perspective, Western school, let's say it. And therefore, we have to question entire history of the planet. And we have to question Western school in getting that much far away with its translation to the world history. It will need to be therefore questioned altogether. I wouldn't go with harassment as jumping on monuments and bringing them down and going on the streets and playing a mad cow disease, but then we want to go somewhere. I wouldn't go that way. I would go legally. I would go properly. I would challenge this in legal houses where these matters will need to be challenged with real historians to be present, and real arguments, political as well, to be presented as well. As for example, as a political argument would be, where is the history of ancient Macedonia? I mean, you cannot have untouched history of Rome going to such details. We know even birth years of all of the emperors of Roman imperialism, but we don't know anything about kings of ancient Macedonia. and the queens of ancient Macedonia. And know such details about Roman imperialism. What is the timeline we're talking about here? We're talking few decades. And it is that we have lost history that much on levels of ancient Macedonia. Now that is, or Olymp, that is somewhere here, it's hidden, and probably it is hidden in the chambers of Vatican itself. Probably in the chambers of Vatican itself. And who is supporting Vatican on that? Well, the Tribunal Society. And today, the fact that Central Europe, without any problem, is rounding up entire Vaticanism and Roman imperialism, should I say, it is just demonstrating who was sitting behind Roman imperialism and behind demolition of Roman imperialism, for that matter as well. And that is Tribunal Society. I mean, the fact that the Pope today is getting with that face value, which is Central Europe, the most tribunal part of Europe altogether, tribunal part of Europe, is just technically what it means. It means that it is technically taking over Roman imperialism altogether, and all of the emperors altogether. And also it is explaining who erased the history before, so it can handle the entire situation more elegantly, because they would be dealing with kids, as remember the two bastard kids of Mother Wolf, they would be actually the future emperors of Rome altogether. Basically, why that is symbol of Rome that much. It is basically referring to emperors of Rome and referring to entire Roman imperialism, which is therefore, it is children level. That is equally how they have been playing it in Britannia. It is children level, and because we can control, they could have controlled children at the time, they could have controlled the kingdoms as well, and today it's very easy for them, which means that at any future time it would be easy for them to roll it all out on their side, as they are elegantly rolling it out, and there is absolutely no problem today that kind of Pope to walk in Rome and slash it all the way to Tribunal Society, which is going to happen probably the next 10 years. It's going to be all tribunal, no problem, because they have been charted it 100 years ago, as that is Masonic order altogether. And Donald Trump is not going to get out of it. Now, I don't give them about Epstein, but Donald Trump is not going to get out of House of Masonry altogether. That is where he is going to be stuck on permanent. House of Masonry altogether. That is what we are after. I don't give them Melania, blah, 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 out there affairs. Please save me a trail. I don't give a damn. What we want to hear here is Masonry protocol and Donald Trump, the golden age of Masonry. Because I don't know what else he would be doing to versus such order. As he looks like a butterfly altogether of it. In that context, let's pay attention. Where I'm going to square Tribunal Society is Olymp and ancient Macedonia, squashed into nothing of a story. And that is all because at that point, they could have not controlled the situation. On that lineage, that line is where they cannot control the situation. And because they cannot control it, they erase it. And then they draw the line with what they cannot control. And that is the lineage of Macedonian kings, which would be, to a certain extent, Asiatic as well. Which would be Asiatic. The lineage of the kings of Macedonia would be Asiatic. And that is why they're drawing the line here. And they're not legalizing that history. Instead, they are covering it up with Atlantis, with some kind of supernatural stories of ancient history there, Hellenic history, which hardly is happening. It is more, we are talking about deities, about, I don't know, beings descending from sky, blah, blah, blah. They're not descending somewhere in Mesopotamia or Tigre or Euphrates. They're descending in ancient Macedonia, where actually we end up talking about Olymp today, and we trace that much of a history today that the Olympic flame is still starting from that point to mark Olympic Games. But we can't chart any of history there. That is simply unacceptable. Simply unacceptable. We would be talking about revealing who were the parents, that is, the father and the mother of Alexander, accordingly. Now, that is what the historic community of the planet Earth today is owing to this planet. And that is where also how I'm going to confront the present translation of imperial or monarchical heritage houses as annulling it or as underestimating their importance. I am returning the importance and the validation to monarchical protocol, an imperial protocol at the point of headquarters and the step mark or genetic line of headquarters before we live in times of genetics, and where genetics is a story we need to keep in perspective, especially when someone is seeking higher point of validation. It will need to be defended by what promise of human on this earth was and continue to be. Upper performance. No matter now how laughable that might sound, but I certainly got inspired to add something more in the context of the above by reaching for papaya fruit to use for my morning smoothie, just to notice the name of the fruit. Papa, obviously reference to father, Ya, me, that is, I am father. And by the shape of that fruit, which is quite in a sizable size, and the color is green outside, green shell, and then it is yellow body, not sweet at all, not that much sweet, also does have the element of sweetness, not too much. It makes me to question, would it not be Olymp happening on Central Earth because someone needed to make a statement about a planet and to declare a planet versus the stars? Would it not be at some point, even at that point of time, overwhelming presence of a variety of species, and would it not be needed even at that point of time to be done exactly what I have reached doing today, some kind of certification, some kind of definition, some kind of drawing the line, where is this earth and what this earth is, and this earth is, and where is the borderline with something else? As much as the reference looks more as to who would be real father of Alexander in some kind of mega projectory, and then I really don't know where we would be locating such identity, if not somewhere obviously where it has been established that we might end up talking about Sumerians and Anunnakis. The question emerges here. Accordingly, I'm going to bring Olymp in that highlight that would have been there for a protocol from where Earth would have been defended or Earth would have been defined, and then it would be confronted with some other kind of mega project that would have been recognized within the protocol Anunnaki/Sumerians, and how even Sumerians happened here. Sumerians to Sumerians, I mean Marigold protocol, or to Sumerians, Marians, certainly bring question to certain historic proportions of that kind of mega scale confronting, I would argue, the planetary identity. Now, I'm not sure that we would be talking about also about extraterrestrial element. I'm going to leave ground that we may need to talk about terrestrial element that would happen as a matter of some kind of biodiversity. But I'm not going to throw away extraterrestrial protocol. Although, again, we would find out, if we find ourselves in some kind of solar system protocol, it would be more like you're in the family of something. I wouldn't be too much upset by solar system events, because they would be reflected on the planets logically. Now we have that phenomena that once in every 2,000 years, another planet in different kind of constellation, by different kind of routing outside of the routing of solar system, which would be considered as the I don't know which number would be 7th, 8th planet of our solar system, that is rotating around our sun in interval of 2 millenniums of time, which means that that particular planet, which is Nibiru, planet Nibiru, exists in different kind of protocol, and it is certainly holding our sun as a magnetic routing. It's very peculiar actually to find someone being affected by magnetism of our sun in interval of 2 millenniums. That we are talking about distance here, where our sun would still be still affecting certain another mass of another planet. It looks to me simply not defendable from any scientific point of view. Of physics that is going to be based on distance, mass, and movement. What kind of magnetic force that, I mean, we are not talking about some kind of particular here, we would be talking about planet. No, that planet would be orbiting our sun every 2 millenniums. How we understand that? We should be certainly doing a bit more of a research on that on that aspect, but that is how weighted our extraterrestrial story is. That is what's the weight of that extraterrestrial story. If we can highlight and prove that there is Nibiru protocol, planet Nibiru, we can accept Anunnakis as a story. If we cannot prove Nibiru, we can't accept Anunnaki as extraterrestrial protocol. And it's not that this that protocol Alexander looks that much rough and tough as how they have been, or just rough, or more like potatoes or kumara on Maori land. You rather find these people in New Zealand than somewhere in Asia, somewhere where is Tiger and Euphrates, where is Iraq or Iran. I wouldn't find these people that much there as you find them in New Zealand. And that is why I'm rather skeptical to such translation of our planetary history. And so what we would be speaking here about is therefore that kind of phenomena of Khazarians, or that would be Khazaria rather. And the father of Alexander would be therefore somewhere in Khazaria. And that is why Papa would be Papa recorded, because it would have been in the region, typical such kind of explanation and such kind of bodies in that period of time would have been reference to Khazaria, which of course would be a reference to Irish tribes traveling in all of the historic times on east, equally as Eastern civilizations have been traveling on east. There is no reason not to believe and take with serious weight the fact that in all of the times of existence of this planet, Western tribes would have been going on east as well. And that has not been accepted that much as a valid historic narrative of the present history. I have been studying history for a longer period of time. It is not enough reflected that we talk about Western tribes, and it is not being reflected in the present overall civilizational culture, political culture, where these tribes and these societies continue to be hidden, secretive. We are talking for 2 millennia on this planet about secrets. We're talking about order of masonry as a secret society. Obviously, society that was having agenda for takeover. What I can't understand here is why someone needs to employ protocol takeover on a planet that already exists and it is charted by its making and by its protocol of a realm which is energetic protocol and exists in its own realm. Why they would be playing God when gods they are not? And you have reflected it all the way to Australia and someone playing Thor. It's nice character, nice stories. It makes you certainly to be fan of the story for some longer period of time. But the fact is that these people are trying to actually talk as a godly protocol. And they have ambition to overwrite the planet from position of gods, which means goods or goodies, which is very much conflicting with how we understand God as authority protocol. It's also conflicting when you end up speaking about goodies rather than gods. And then it's not being answered who actually is real authority on this earth, who is actually really moving this earth, including protocol, God, or goodies altogether. And what are the value systems by which these people, these entities would be living if they're mocking God or goodies? If they're mocking God/goodies, then by which protocol they are living themselves? Here we reach beyond Sumerians, if that would be Sumerians. If Khazaria is Sumerians. Then we would be speaking as masonry, still reference to M, mother. still on the level of Alexander, the son of the mother. What is beyond this is Anunnakis / Iran / Zulu / Maya / Maoris of New Zealand. / Zealandia. And there, when we find that protocol, which is the earlier tribunal societies, beyond the golden sun, that are united by the gods of darkness, not by the god of positive energy or good energy, and continue to mock our son Alexander, and to mock the overall protocol of refinement and sophistication and whatever. And it is still in Middle East, Mecca, mocking the softness of human protocol. And on that note, Israel is playing devil today, confidently. Because Israel is attacking the Mecca protocol, or protocol soft. Palestinians here are genetic lineage of the soft. They are within the genetic lineage, Palestinians. Because they have that kind of mega protocol in them. Or we might talk about certain tribes, just about certain tribes. But the fact is that there is some kind of alignment between Palestine, Macedonia, Ireland, the soft, as that kind of mega / Alexandria protocol, or let's call it some kind of lineage with Sumerians, or let's call that Khazaria. And lineage with the entire division of Sunni versus Shia population. When you bring it on that level, and when you see that Jewish have stood at the moment are standing on position of Shia, Sunnis and Palestinians end up with protocol Sunni. Arabic protocol in general would be prevailing on the Sunni protocol, on the Sunni side. And it is the protocol soft versus not something that's not soft. When someone extracts such kind of reference, soft, then on the other side would be something that is not soft. Now it gets much more complicated considering the fact that we have softness. Also, China and Far Eastern countries are bringing that kind of silkiness from Far East, which might develop into softness when combined in genetics. However, we certainly have softness as a typical Central European reference, because it is a plateau where wheat has been cultivated for a longer period of time, and all sorts of bread continue to be very traditional food in entire Central Asia and Central Asian and European levels. Bread is very much something that is very much typical for that population, including Central European, and that's reference to soft. Now, Middle East completely splits on soft and not being soft. On the other side, I'm not saying that now Palestinians are going to end up to be godly and the other is going to be playing a devil, because we rather find ourselves more in the corridors of Adam versus Eve. And where Eve is not self-standing, there is accordingly devil is not self-standing, or because we exist here, the life itself exists within some kind of definition of positivism, because it is about giving birth, and everything that get nurturing from there is very positive. It is like explosion of positive energy. This realm, I would argue, is explosion of positive energy, because the main aspects of this entire life in this realm are based in the most magnificent and beautiful sentiment. From even I would call that a self-admiration or self-acceptance, to falling in love, to giving birth to a baby. These are all magnificent elements of positive energy. Creativity on the level of personal self-admiration, self-discovery. It is more like godly element of beautiful realm that we also reflect. So self-admiration, self-discovery, and creativity continues with story of love, continues with story of giving birth, continues with making family. This realm is a realm of positive energy. Life in this realm is beautiful, positive energy. And that's why I'm going to say neither Eve here exists as a protocol, neither evil, neither devil would exist in a natural way. They would exist as such because someone philosophically needed to invent them for a variety of manipulative and political purposes that would emerge later on in what unveil as much more complex history on which we sign today. But in substance, let's notice that in substance, and ultimately even as a philosophical parameter, we can't talk about negativity here in the region, on this realm, because it is about life energy, because all of these people have families and have kids and have feelings of being a human being, and are inspired by very same feelings as the rest of us. You can't draw on this planet that kind of line, and I'm not sure that you can draw it anywhere else, for that matter, because ultimately, in most absolute terms, this is now like higher stake in philosophy, and I would say even explosion of life is by itself, of explosion of universe, if we call it Big Bang, it is announcement of beginning of something that is shiny and positive and beautiful, as it is sensational. And ultimately, sensational is beautiful, and it is positive, and it is creativity. Ultimately, existence versus non-existence. Existence itself as a phenomena is explosion of positivism, because positivism builds a story. Positivism builds everything that we can, all of this cloud that becomes that universe. And we can talk about endlessly in that many poetry and music and all of the rest. It is exactly creative, positive energy. So I don't believe in negative energy. I just don't believe in negative energy. I believe that it is all up to mothering a child, all up to bringing cultural setting in a society, and how you shape humans. That is what you get out of it. In that context, it's very hard for me to talk about some kind of creatures on the other side, because I don't believe in creatures on the other side. And as much as the planet expects that we find some kind of conflicting line here as we go on the east side, I can't find it. I certainly can find the yellow platform of Hazaria, and I certainly can find genetics losing its beauty there, as being scarred for some reason. And I think that scarredness, it is either from atomic bomb or the food, or both. When atomic bomb create impoverished region and scarce in food, and people end up being hungry and then compromising their diet and things like that. There's no other explanation why someone would look more as an insect nation if not genetic mutation. The only question we need to answer today is on what level genetic mutation is taking place. Are we to accuse someone? Or is it a result of the life conditions? As a result of geographic consequences, geographic environment, which I believe that is rather that. So I guess what I need to do here will be therefore father of Alexander versus Olympia. And I will notice that Olympia would have been sitting on position of Indo-European Celts, as reflected all the way to England, via entire history of Roman imperialism, and Serbia certainly being together with Macedonia, carriers of that kind of lineage and that kind of transition on that line from Asia to West. And I would notice Olympia that sitting on that point. Here also it is very logical to presume that at that point of time and out of such property it would have been possible to create out of such properties it would have been possible, which basically are Asian properties, would be going all the way to Far East countries. These bloodlines would be there for delivering, would bring that kind of capacity to bring protocol Olymp somewhere in Olymp, and would be in capacity to deliver much more complex political performance. Another element that will need to be noticed in the time would be Khazars. That is testimony that in the same time West was traveling towards the East, and that is another niche here, another river, as they want to call it, or as they also call it, currency, another currency which is happening much more on the level of Central European plateau, and it's going in line to Asia, and it is basically passing through Ukraine and going towards Russia on that corridor, and all of the south countries that are south of Asia, countries that are south of Russia. We have here Armenia, Uzbekistan, things like that. Now, therefore, these are two very strong lines that one can notice in ancient times of that period. Therefore, one is the line of mother, that is Olympia protocol, which is going from east towards west, and the other line which goes from west towards east, that would have been playing father to Alexander. And I'm going to therefore notice that history of Macedonia, ancient Macedonia, would be happening in that context, therefore, accordingly, not just under the influence of West going on East, but also under the influence of East going on West. And at both lines, father and mother will need to be recognized in a given historic context, being Alexander, for example. Now, if we talk about Olymp as well here, I would be bringing much more in context the actual region, without speaking that much about that particular ancient, that particular family, where therefore in highlight of Olymp, you get much more in perspective actual fabric of the region in certain period of time, which is undoubtedly central planetary, it is center of the planet, in the way how center is having its meaning when it is center of the city. Now these territories are center of the planet, accordingly having very high stake of strategic significance. Now what one can do out of it in a given time is also historic question. As I'm listening now, music of David Bowie at the moment, I just wonder, would it not be father of Alexander still falling in that lineage of Darius if mother was holy enough? Or maybe it doesn't have to be father, it might be grandfather. We talked here about grandfathers and grandmothers as well, altogether. We also have protocol Buddha in India, so somewhere here that imperial family and that imperial principal, imperial bloodline in that region exist in already noticed and marked corridors. We just need to understand them in most correct terms, especially also when we want to get specific about certain certification of history, how that would go exactly. Also, Alexander certainly did not have time to develop into some kind of fat, overweighted protocol. He was not overweight at the time. So let's not speculate with history as it was in a given time. Noticing David Bowie accordingly, I'm going to conclude, I would not be denying that that Daria of Iran would be equally still qualifying for father of Alexander. Father of the kingdom, for that matter. That is where Serbia comes in perspective. And that is why Serbia wants to call the kingdom theirs, because it is per father. I'm not surrendering anything to anyone. I'm just pointing out importance of each of these historic presences and territories and identities in a certain family-driven history in certain region where people continue to be like that, and where that region cannot be taken away from these people because it belongs to them, and the history that happened there would be reflecting the people of the region and would have been theirs altogether and cannot be taken away from them either. That is what I'm trying to say here. So when we start moving in Europe, we know how we go in Europe. And what in Europe now can be considered as a unknown, or how we start from Austria, just like Austria, there is nothing behind Austria. What I'm saying it should not be so easy to speak of Iran in the way how we speak of Iran today, or of Syria in the way how we speak. We go and admire everything in Vienna, but then we go and in Middle East and then we slam down everything. Life doesn't happen like that. A planet doesn't happen like that. And that would be a remark to Europeans as well. Europe doesn't fall from the sky. And to see Europe constantly projecting such disassociation with the rest of the planet, especially part that is parenting Europe altogether. Well, it's not about opening doors. I mean, that is what I would rather avoid. If you were to be much more paying attention rather than to detach that much from Middle East. If you were to take care of Middle East in the way how you have been taking care of yourself in all of the history, maybe we would not be where we are today in such sharp differences in the overall economic development. which then makes you to be targeted and to go like run away from whatever, rather than if it would have been the situation where the things would have been a bit more smooth. I'm not saying that it is easy. It was easy to deal with phenomena as it is Byzantine, where there is some kind of very hazardous men behaving in very hazardous manner versus their environment. But all I can notice is that Europeans and the West Wing would have tried to make it even worse rather than better. But the fact that they ended up to promote my husband and to use him as a weapon against me, rather than to take benefit of my existence, indicates that in the previous times also you've been taking wrong path, and you continue to take wrong path. West Wing, you continue to take wrong path in the way of how you deal with historic heritage houses of the rest of the planet. And then that is returning to you as a boomerang. And now asking me for help should be given in return answer in the size of this work, preceding the situation accordingly. From positions that I can only today claim and declare as how I have to, as a central planet, as a center of the planet.